Chapter 21. I just stared back at Queen Lydia, feeling completely disgusted with her. You're the one who killed my parents. Here, I had mistakenly thought that it was Milo Santorini for so long, for literally years. When I had found out that it wasn't him, I had wondered who could have possibly wanted my adoptive parents to die. My biological mother never would have crossed my mind, considering I hadn't even known that she was alive. But learning that it was her who had done made me feel physically sick. Why would she have done this? How could she have done this? Oh, don't act so surprised. Anyone in my shoes would have done the same thing. She rolled her eyes at me. Do you realize how it felt for me to learn that two powerful werewolves were raising the daughter I had given birth to? That they had wiped away all of your memories so that you wouldn't remember me, or the life that they were trying to protect you from, even though it meant erasing your memories of me? What they did was wrong, extremely wrong. How did you even know that they did any of that? I asked her with raised eyebrows. After Headmaster Black began to suspect that the Gallaghers had taken you under their wing, I had to investigate. I went to your town and I followed you around. I followed you to the supermarket one day, and I even waved to you. You didn't even recognize me. That was the moment that I knew they had swiped your memories. So, I went to visit a very good witch and she showed me a vision. It confirmed everything that I had thought to be true. Queen Lydia reached out and touched me then. A scene began to play out before me then, and I realized that she was transferring this witch's vision to me. I watched as my parents stood talking to someone. At first all I could see was their backs, but then the vision shifted and I could see all four of their faces. Cain stood before my parents. I heard that the two of you recently lost a son. Yeah, he was murdered by the vampires, my adoptive father explained. How could they kill a poor innocent werewolf child? My mom swallowed hard. She was shaking and I was pretty sure she was fighting the urge to cry. My mother had never been one to cry in front of anyone. She always put on a brave face even during her darkest times. This had clearly been one of them. There's this myth that says that sacrificing a werewolf for their blood will make a vampire stronger, my father explained. So they sacrificed him. They drank all of his blood, every drop. They murdered our son, all for their own selfish gain. I'm so terribly sorry for your loss, Cain said. I want to offer you my sincerest, deepest condolences. Thank you. My mom offered him a smile. What if I told you guys that I can help you get back at the vampires? Cain asked. How could we do that? My father asked. Well, it involves adopting a child. An older child. A teenager, actually. She's 16 years old, and obviously she won't get any older. Would you be open to that? We love children, my mom replied with a nod. What if I told you that I need you to adopt her on a long-term basis? Cain asked. A long-term basis? My dad looked confused. I know this all is going to sound a little strange. The werewolf in question is Princess Fallon. The Princess Fallon who's next in line to be queen? My mom's eyes widened. That would be the one. Why would she need us to adopt her? My dad asked. She has parents of her own, ones who can offer her far more than we can. We could give a child a great life, but she is a princess, my mom agreed. With a nod. I doubt she would want us to adopt her. Well, that's the thing. Princess Fallon wouldn't actually know you're adopting her, Cain explained. How would she not know? My dad asked. We would wipe away all of the memories that she currently has. I know it sounds extreme, but here's the thing. Her life is in very grave danger. I need you guys to protect her for me. She isn't safe here. She will never be safe here. Nocturne Island is dangerous for Fallon. You mean Queen Lydia is dangerous for Fallon? My adoptive mother corrected. That's right. How did you know? Cain's eyes widened. I've heard stories. One of the stories was that Queen Lydia wants to kill her own daughter. I thought it was just a story, but based on what you're telling us, it sounds like it could be true. It is true, Cain replied with a nod. You see, the problem is that Queen Lydia will stop at nothing to make sure that Fallon marries Milo Santorini. I've heard that he's ruthless, savage. My mom looked horrified at the idea. You're not wrong about that either. Fallon wants nothing to do with the marriage. She doesn't love Milos. Who could love such a monster? He's not just a monster. He's a murderer, just like the vampires who killed your son. You wouldn't want her to have to end up in the wrong hands, would you? Of course not, my mother agreed. Me either, Kane agreed. The problem is that Queen Lydia still wants Fallon to proceed with the marriage. I'm pretty sure that the Queen will even kill Princess Fallon if she doesn't go through with the marriage, which was set to take place last night. Fortunately, I helped Fallon escape. Here's the thing. You're probably wondering why I am so invested in this. Well, Fallon is the girl who I love and she loves me. She's already agreed to spend the rest of her life with me, but that can't happen right now. It isn't safe right now. Need you guys to keep her safe for me. Of course. We'll do anything we can do to help, my adoptive father agreed. With a nod. I want you to take her to a witch who lives in New York. Her name is Shonda. She will erase all of her memories of this life, of being Princess Fallon and, most importantly, of Nocturne Island. If we don't get rid of those memories, there's a good chance that she'll try to come back. She can't do that. She has to forget about Nocturne Island, about her royal upbringing, and even about me. Why do you want her to forget you when you're so in love with one another? My mom sounded sort of skeptical. Because now isn't the time for us to be together. I will come back for her when she's ready, but that won't be for a very long time, Kane replied. I need you to wipe her memories away now and every so often. About every 16 years or so, wipe her memories away and move to a new location, a new town, new school, a new life. Please. I'm begging you. There was a pleading look in his eyes. Of course, Kane. We will raise her as if she was our own daughter. My adoptive father replied. Over and over again, my mom agreed with a nod. We'll do anything to avenge our son's death, my adoptive father added. We will do whatever it takes you to help you overthrow them. Thank you. This means so much to me. One day I will marry that girl when the timing is right. She will become queen and I will become king. And then I will make sure that the vampires are overthrown. I will make sure that they pay for what they did to your son. I promise you that. We'll take good care of her, my mother promised. And we'll be in touch, my adoptive father added. Good. Kane shot them a smile that made me want to punch him in the face. The memory stopped just as quickly as it had begun, and I was left feeling sick to my stomach. Wow. Kane had done the best thing he could have done for me. In a way, he had protected me from the paranormal realm, from the werewolves, and from Queen Lydia. He had saved me from marrying Milos Santorini, and he had placed me into the care of my adoptive parents, who I would forever be grateful to know. But he had done all of it for his own selfish gain. He had manipulated my poor innocent adoptive parents into taking care of me, giving them hopes of helping them avenge the murder of their son. I couldn't believe that my adoptive parents had even given birth to a child of their own, a child long before me. They must have been in so much pain when they had agreed to help Kane keep me protected, and the pain that they'd experienced must have never gone away for them to continue to keep me protected for such a long time. I was going to assume that, until the day they both had died, they had still wanted to avenge their biological son's death. It made me feel so sad for them, and so angry at Kane for manipulating them the way he had, also he could marry me in the end. All because he wanted the power that came with being king. What Kane had done was completely disgusting, and it was even more upsetting to know that this monster was the father of my baby. What if my baby grew up to be like him? That was the absolute last thing I wanted, but I couldn't allow myself to forget that this baby was half him, half monster. So, that was intense, wasn't it? Queen Lydia asked, interrupting my thoughts. To say the least, I muttered under my breath. I hated Kane for what he had done. I hated him for using his manipulation, tactics and trickery on my parents. But I hated Queen Lydia even more for murdering my parents. What do you want from me, Lydia? Actually, it's mother to you, she said, a cold look in her eyes. I ignored her. Why did you kidnap me? What was the point? I heard that you were with child. Her eyes met mine. I want your baby. Raven. I glared at her. Over my dead body. I would think twice before you tell me no, brat. Queen Lydia's eyes met mine. Guess who I happened to find out in the forest today? She leaned in closer, showing me a picture on her cell phone. I stared at Reese, Colton, and Aiden. All three of them were laying in what looked like a pile of dirt. What have you done to them? They're in a hole in the ground right now. The cool thing about this little trap I've set up is that if they try to climb out, the sensors will trigger silver bullets to be shot off every so often. She shot me a wicked grin. Hope they enjoy staying put. I felt sick to my stomach. Let them go. Gladly. In exchange for your baby. I'm not giving you my baby, I replied. If I was you, I would think again. Eventually, the Darken Pack is going to try to climb their way out of that. They're bound to get hungry at some point. And if one of those guns happens to go off, well, I would hate to think of what would happen to them. She glanced over at me. We know all too well what happens when a silver bullet comes too close to a werewolf's heart, don't we? Now, my heart pounded against my chest. It was you who shot Theo years ago on the Werewolf Academy campus. Yeah, I know that was something else that Milos got the blame for, but I set it up that way. I used magic to make myself look like him to trick you all into thinking it was me, she replied with a wicked laugh. One thing you should probably know by now is that you can never outsmart a queen. She winked at me. I swallowed hard, feeling the tears flood my eyes. They were tears of anger. I hated this woman more than I ever thought myself capable of hating anyone. The worst part about it all was that I wasn't even sure how much I could really hate Milos for anymore. It wasn't that I believed that he was good, because he wasn't. That much I already knew for sure. But so many things that I had thought he was behind were actually my mother's doing. So what's it going to be? Are you going to hand your baby over to me, or are you going to let your mates die? Why do you even want my child? I asked her then. I messed up with you. I want a second chance, a do-over. My mother stared down at my stomach. I want the opportunity to raise the perfect future king. Or queen. I am the queen. I swallowed hard. What if we can compromise? What if I allow you to be a part of your grandchild's life, if you let my mates go? That simply isn't enough. I want to raise the baby as my own. Her eyes met mine. You owe that to me, Fallon. You ran away from me when you were far too young. I was nearly 18, Mother. It was time for me to leave the nest soon. Anyway, you were never meant to leave. You were meant to marry Milos Santorini and become the most powerful queen in the world. You, my dear, were too stubborn. My intentions are to raise this child to be the most powerful king there is. Or queen. We don't know the gender yet, I informed her. It's a boy, darling. I am able to read baby genders, and your child's energy is completely masculine. I had my doubts about what she was saying. Fine. How's this? You let me go. And you let my mates go. Once the baby is born, I will hand him over to you. And in the meantime, I would try to come up with a plan. I just needed to make sure that my mates were released before it was too late. You're lying, Fallon. I can tell that you're lying. You don't actually want this, Queen Lydia said. I'm really not lying, I insisted, forcing a smile. I would love to see him be raised by someone as lovely as you. You'll just be taking him off my hands. I don't believe you. She shrugged. You should probably work on your lying skills. It's time for me to go check on your mates. We'll see if they're still alive, I suppose. In the meantime, you can sit here and think about what you need to do. She turned to head out of the barn door, but then she turned to face me. I nearly forgot to tape your mouth shut. Ripping some tape off of the roll, she placed it over my mouth again. Then she closed the door to the barn again, leaving me in complete and total. Chapter 22. As I stared into the darkness, I could feel my anger building with every minute that passed. Who did Queen Lydia think she was to believe she was entitled to my baby? My son, possibly. It just made me feel completely disgusted. What disgusted me just as much was the fact that Kane hadn't even figured out that I was gone yet. He was probably still sleeping peacefully in the king's quarters, completely unaware that I wasn't in my queen's quarters. I made a decision then. I no longer wanted to be with him. Once I got back to the castle, I was going to end the marriage. I wasn't sure how he was going to respond to that, but I would worry about that later. Right now, I needed to figure out how the hell I was going to get out of here. I tried to use my magic. I thought about how I wanted the rope around my wrists to break. I tried to do every type of magic I could think of to break the rope and open the door, but nothing I did seemed to work. I figured out then that my mother must have put a block up to prevent me from using my magic within the confines of the barn. Figured that she would do that. Anything she could do to prevent me from escaping from her hell. I suppose that it shouldn't have surprised me. My last memory of Queen Lydia was her holding me prisoner in her tower, and now she was holding me prisoner In this barn. That seemed to be how our relationship seemed to go. Well, I had gotten away from her once. I would figure out a way to do it again. I wasn't sure how much time had passed. I saw the sun rise and set again. Was at least one day into this prison and I still hadn't figured out how the hell I was going to get out of it. All I knew was that once I did, there was going to be some serious hell to pay. I was tired and hungry. I knew the baby was hungry too. It surprised me that the baby hadn't tried to kill me again. If it was going to hate me, it should have been hating me for not feeding it. I was sure that it was just a matter of time. I didn't want to think negatively, but I had a feeling that we were going to die out here. I was beginning to feel really angry at Kane for not figuring out my whereabouts by now. I didn't know how far away I was from the castle, but Nocturne Island wasn't that big. He should have sent out a search party for me by now. Then again, for all I knew, maybe there was a search party out there looking for me. Maybe Queen Lydia had just kept me so well hidden that no search party could even find me. I was pretty sure that she knew this island better than most of us did. I had always tried to stay optimistic, but honestly, I was beginning to lose hope. 3 more days passed and I didn't think I was going to live much longer. Unless I drank water or ate something. I could feel myself getting weaker every day. This wasn't how a werewolf pregnancy was supposed to go. I was surprised when I heard the sound of the barn door open that night. It was dark out, but I knew that it could have only been Lydia. But to my surprise, there was a male figure who stood in the doorway. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, so I didn't see his face at first. But when he approached me, my heart pounded against my chest. Relax, Raven. Your heart is beating like a hummingbird. I'm not going to hurt you, he said as his black eyes locked on mine. I've actually come to rescue you. Chapter 23. As Milo Santorini peeled the tape off of my mouth, his eyes locked on mine. You seem so timid around me. Why would you help me? I asked, swallowing hard. Why wouldn't I help you? Because you've been following me around for years now to kill me. Now, suddenly, you've come to my rescue. Raven, I have never wanted to kill you. I used to want to marry you, yes. Will not deny this. It was very heartbreaking to be promised something only to have you run away forever on the night of what would have been our wedding. I didn't understand why I wasn't good enough for you. I told you that I wanted to marry my mate, I insisted. Yes, well, I can understand why. You see, I have recently met mine. You have. It was hard to believe that the universe would have mated Milos to anyone. It seemed cruel, unless his mate was equally as cruel. Yes, and there is no love like the love I feel for my mate, Milos replied. With a nod. I'm confused. If you have a mate, then why did you crash my wedding? Asked. I didn't realize that was what we were doing. That was all Iris's idea. She was rather obsessed with you. She wanted to be you all because she knew that I had once loved you. He shrugged. I'm glad she's gone now. That bitch was crazy. As he began to cut the ropes off my hands, I asked, if you have a mate then, why are you even here? How do you know where I am? The only reason I followed you around at all over the past 6 months is because I wanted to warn you about Queen Lydia. I knew that she was gearing up to do something crazy. His black eyes met mine. She's planning to kill you. Once she gets back to the barn, you know. She is? How do you know that? I heard her talking to Jean. He's her boyfriend, he explained. He lives back in Wolflandia. They were talking on the phone, and she told him that she planned to weaken you enough to the point where you won't heal. Then she planned to cut the baby out of you before murdering you. He finished cutting my hands free and then began to work on my feet. I would have gotten to you sooner, but she's been near the barn most of this time. She finally just left. Do you know where the Darken Pack is? I asked. They're in a hole not far away from here. Once we've finished here, I will go turn off the sensors she's using in the trap so they can escape too. As he freed my feet, I asked, why are you being so nice to me? Because I no longer want you in the way I once did, he replied. And what I did you was pretty horrible. But mostly I just wanted a kiss from you to ignite the triangle. I wanted to become more powerful. Now that I've had a taste for power, I no longer care for it as much as I once did, he informed me. Wow. I was shocked to hear him say those words. I feel like my Kane think he craves it more than once did. Kane isn't a good guy, Raven. He never has been and he never will be. You're Mother was extremely opposed to you marrying him during the ancient times, and she wasn't wrong about that. You'd be better off getting away from him even. Though I know that won't be easy, all things considered. He pointed his chin. And my pregnant stomach. Yeah. You have to end this war. Everyone is waiting for you to end it. Milos went on. How? I don't really know what I'm supposed to do to end it, I admitted. I'd given it so much thought, especially since I had been locked up in this barn, alone with nothing but my thoughts, and I just couldn't seem to figure it out. Well, the rest of the paranormal world believes that the werewolves are the ones who started this, Milos explained. Because technically they did. And by they I meant him. He let out a little chuckle. I suppose we did. So anyway, all you need to do is get yourself on TV and announce that the war is over, that freedom rings, whatever you want to say. Just let the rest of the paranormal world know that you, the Queen of the Wolves, is calling it quits on this war. Your husband should probably be there too. Okay, I agreed with a nod. I would be sure to include Kane in that, right? Before I most likely kicked him to the curb. I wasn't sure how the whole curb kicking thing was going to work when our souls were permanently bound together, but I was about to find out. At that moment I spotted her out of the corner of my eye. Just a flash of light hair. Milos, watch out, I said. He whirled around and pulled the gun out of his pocket so fast it wasn't even funny. Before he even allowed Queen Lydia to say a word, he fired the gun. I watched as my mother fell lifelessly to the ground. Chapter 24. Knowing that Queen Lydia was truly dead, once and for all, was a huge relief. As I followed Milos to the hole where she had been keeping my mates, I hoped that nothing had happened to any of them. As we approached the hole, I glanced inside. I breathed a sigh of relief to find that all three of them were down there, fully alive. Raven? You're okay. Thank God you're okay. Aiden called up to me. I'm okay. Queen Lydia's dead. Milos killed her when he rescued me from the barn that she has been keeping me in, I told them. Here, Raven, have a sandwich. Milos handed me a sandwich wrapped in foil, along with a bottle of water. Even though I normally would have worried that he was trying to poison me or something, he had proved today that he was on my side. I was willing to let him stay alive when he had proven himself to be the good guy. Besides, I wasn't sure how much he had even done to try to hurt me in the past. One thing was for sure, though. The past was the past. I was so ready to focus on the future. As I opened the foil and then took a bite of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I thought about what needed to be done next. Step 1. Rescue my mates from the hole. Step 2. End the war. Milos is going to turn off the sensors that could kill you, and then you guys can climb out of there, I told them. I even have some rope to help lift you, Milos offered as he pressed what looked like a remote control. Sensors are off. Tossing the long rope into the hole, Colton grabbed it first. Milos helped lift him out of the hole. Next, Aiden climbed out, and then Reese. Why are you being so cool with us? Colton asked him. I've just had a change of heart. Milos shrugged. I met my mate. I fell in love. I'm a different person now. I kind of like this version of you, Reese said with a shrug. We all do, I agreed. Who would have thought that, in the end, Milos Santorini would be the one to save our lives? Chapter 25. My mates all transitioned to their werewolf forms as we headed back to the castle. I had never really realized how beautiful each of them looked in their wolf form. It was the little things in life, the things that you appreciated after a near-death experience. Once we made it back to the castle, they all turned back to their human forms. I had a hard time not jumping all of their bones. To say that they looked completely gorgeous naked would have been an understatement. You guys, I need your help. How can I arrange to have a speech I want to give aired on television? I asked. Easy. I can get a hold of Luke and have it arranged, Aiden explained. What are you planning on doing? Ending the war. It was actually Milos's suggestion. I smiled, surprised that I would ever be giving him credit for something. When do you want to do this? Aiden asked. In about an hour? I asked. All right. I'll go charge up my phone and make a call. Thank you. I paused for a moment. Do you think we can arrange for there to be an audience too? Yeah, I think we can figure that out. He stood there for a moment, his honey brown eyes on mine. I'm sorry, by the way. I'm sorry that I ever got upset with you before we went hunting. Don't apologize, I informed him. You have every right to feel the way you do about me choosing Aiden. You should know that it's a decision I regret. I decided not to tell him what I had planned next. I knew it would be better for everyone to all just watch it all unfold. Once we were inside the castle, I headed straight for the king's quarters. The door was unlocked, so I opened it. I found Kane sitting in front of the TV. What are you doing? I asked him. He turned to me, a look of confusion in his green eyes. Where have you been? For the past few days. Well, since you asked, I was actually kidnapped. Kidnapped? His eyes widened. By who? Queen Lydia. He shot me a funny look. She died hundreds of years ago. Actually, she didn't. She's been in hiding all of these years, I explained. She's dead now. Fortunately, I was able to escape from her. No thanks to you. Raven, I'm sorry. I had no idea you were kidnapped, he said quietly. Where did you think I went? I asked him. Honestly, I thought you were upset about our fight and ran away because of it, he explained. I suppressed an eye roll. Well, I didn't. It hurts to know that you didn't even bother to look for me. I'm really sorry, Raven. Even though he said the words, the truth was that he didn't really even look sorry. It was as if he just knew that he was supposed to apologize, but his voice completely lacked emotion. I need you to do something for me, I told him. Sure, what is it? Kane asked. I need you to get dressed and then meet me in about an hour. I want you to meet me on the platform where our crowns are. I want to sit on them. Do you think you can do that? I asked him. Sure, but why? I want to feel the power of sitting upon our thrones. I want to know how it feels. His eyes slid over to meet mine as a smile crept onto his face. That's my girl. He leaned in and kissed me on the lips. I kissed him back, knowing that it was all just an act on my part at this point. Oh, one other thing. Wear your crown for me too, okay? I asked him. Of course, my queen. I headed to my room and got ready. To say that I was nervous would have been an understatement. I knew that I couldn't tell Kane what I was about to do because I was certain that he would fight me over it. He wouldn't want to end this war even if I begged him to. But I also knew that no one would take it seriously unless we were both there to address the entire paranormal world. That was the downside of the patriarchal paranormal society we lived in. A queen's address alone just wouldn't be enough. Well, I had a plan. I just hoped that it would work. Chapter 26. I got to our thrones before Kane did. That gave me just the right amount of time to do what needed to be done for this to work out. Silenti audioso for Kane's ears only upon his arrival, I whispered, hoping that it would work. If Kane wasn't able to hear my address, then there was nothing he would be able to do to stop it in the moment. And that was all I needed, to end the war with him by my side, without him knowing what was going on. This plan seemed too good to be true. I was afraid that it wouldn't work. Glancing out in the crowd, I noticed that there was a fairly large audience already sitting there, waiting to see what my address would be. It hadn't taken much time for Aiden to round up an audience for me. I hadn't really cared about there being an audience, but that was how it had all played out in Gloria's vision. I wanted to keep it as accurate to her vision as possible. The other Darkin all approached the platform where I was already sitting upon my throne wearing my crown. I want the cameraman to go under an invisibility spell, I told them. Do you think we can arrange that? An invisibility spell? Why? Colton asked with raised eyebrows. Because Kane has no idea what I'm about to do. I've already done a spell, so he won't hear anything when he arrives, but I just realized that he'll see the cameraman too, unless we make him invisible. Kane is going to flip out when he realizes you've gone to so many extremes just to hide from him that you're ending the war, Aiden said. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Yes, I replied with a nod. I had never been more certain about anything before in my life. Okay, the camera guy is here now, Colton said, pointing his chin at a guy who was walking in our direction. I'll go tell him why we need him to become invisible. Thanks, Colton. As Colton and Reese both headed in the camera guy's direction, Aiden glanced over at me. You're a beautiful queen. Have I told you that? Thanks, I replied with a smile. At that moment, I felt a cramp in my stomach, pass just as quickly as I'd felt it come on. I mean it, Raven. You're beautiful and powerful. His honey brown eyes met mine. I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished so far. And I'm so proud of you for coming up with this scheme to end the war without Kane knowing. It's the right thing to do. Let's just hope it works, I replied quietly. Even though I knew that I was doing everything I possibly could to make this happen, there was this doubt in the back of my mind that told me that something wasn't going to go according to plan. I chalked it up to nerves. I was about to trick my husband, my king, into doing something I knew he wouldn't want to do. Anyone in my situation would have been nervous and maybe a little bit paranoid. At that moment I spotted Kane walking over to us. Glancing over at Colton and Reese, who were standing center of the stage, I breathed a huge sigh of relief. The camera guy was no longer invisible, so I knew that they had already placed him under an invisibility spell. I remembered that in Gloria's vision, I had begun my address before Kane walked onto the stage. So that was exactly what I was going to do. Ready, set, record, I announced to the camera guy. Rolling, he called out to me. I began my speech. Ladies and gentlemen across all of the paranormal societies, I have an announcement to make to you. King Kane and I have made a decision today, one that affects all of us. I forced a smile for the camera. It is with great pride that I announce to you that the war has ended. While we mourn the deaths of the ones we have lost, we are relieved that more lives weren't taken from us. I promise you that during my reign we will never see a war as ugly as the one we are now free of. At that moment Kane walked across the stage, wearing his crown atop his head. As he sat down on his throne next to me, he looked completely confused. I hadn't warned him that there would be an audience. But he also didn't look like he was confused in a bad way either. I was pretty sure that he was happy to find that there were so many people there, watching him sit on his throne and wear his crown. Going forward, we will see some changes happening. I darted my eyes over at Kane to see if he could hear what I was saying, but he was looking in the other direction, completely oblivious that I had spoken. I beamed, relieved that my spell had worked. First of all, I asked that all battles going on right now stop immediately. Please cease fire. I paused. Once there have been no more battles, I want us to resume life as usual. Workplaces will reopen and schools will resume, including Werewolf Academy and Lupin Academy, I announced. People cheered from the audience. I noticed Kane wave at the crowd. I tried hard not to chuckle at the fact that he thought they were cheering at us sitting upon our thrones. I felt something again then. Pain radiating through me. Something wasn't right. I will have more updates to come. That is all for now. Thank you for listening to this address. Then, without saying another word, I rose from the throne and hurried off the platform. Glancing over my shoulder, I was surprised to find that Kane was actually following after me. I would have expected him to continue to drink up all of the attention he was getting. As I reached the door that led into the rest of the castle, I found myself hunching over in pain in the hallway. Raven, is everything all right? Kane asked from behind me. I felt the waves rippling through my core. They started out lightly before intensifying. They were extremely close together, only seconds apart. I knew that they were contractions. I glanced down at my stomach, realizing how much more pregnant I looked than I had just days ago. Somehow this baby had managed to thrive even while we were being starved by the queen. A contraction hit me then. It was strong and painful enough to make me yelp. Raven, Kane whispered. Glancing over at him, I said, the baby's coming. Kane said, his eyes wide. It's coming now? Yes. I hissed at him through another contraction. I felt water trickling down my legs. Your water just broke, he commented. There should be enough time for us to get you to Gloria. I don't think there's enough time. My face twisted with the pain that shot through me. I don't know what to do. I need help, I groaned out through gritted teeth. You think I have any idea what to do? Kane asked, an angered expression on his face. I couldn't believe he was fighting with me right now. I shouldn't have been so surprised. But this wasn't about him and how much of a jerk he was being. I needed to figure out how to get this baby out of me without us both dying. Could a werewolf even die during labor? If the baby could have killed me while it was inside of me, I was pretty sure that it could have killed me while it was trying to make its way out of me, but I wasn't sure. I started walking down the hallway, in the direction of one of the closest bedrooms. Where are you going? Kane questioned my turn back. Where do you think, Kane? Queens do not give birth to their babies on the floor. But it was already too late. My body didn't care that I was a queen. It had other plans. As I started to push involuntarily, I fell to my knees on the marble-tiled floor. I wasn't sure how much longer I had. When I caught a glimpse of Kane's face, I couldn't help but notice that he looked a little disgusted. Or maybe he was grossed out about the fact that I was about to give birth to our little prince or princess right there in the middle of the hallway. Either way, he turned away from me so he didn't have to watch what would happen next. At that moment, I felt a pair of strong arms lifting me up. As I glanced up into his dark blue eyes, I said, "Reese, I need you." I didn't speak the rest of my thoughts out loud. I need you because I don't want to give birth with Kane. I didn't want him there. I wanted my other mates too. Every single one of them. "I know, baby. That's why I'm here," Reese said as he carried me into the bedroom and laid me down on the bed. "Have you ever delivered a baby before?" I managed to grunt out. "Yes, I have. I used to be a doctor about 20 years ago." I felt a huge sense of relief, knowing I was in good hands. My other mates came into the room then. Colton grabbed my left hand, as Aiden moved around to the other side of me and grabbed my right hand. "I need you to push for me, Raven," Reese told me. And so I did. I screamed out in pain the entire time. "We've almost got him." Him. Queen Lydia had been right. "One more big push," Reese instructed. I pushed with everything I had. A moment later, I heard the baby crying and then watched as Reese took him away to clean him off. I laid back on the bed, completely exhausted. Raven," Reese said as he handed me the baby. "I really don't think this is Kane's baby." "What do you mean?" I let out a little laugh. But then I stared down into the baby's face, and I realized exactly what he meant. The baby's black hair and striking bright blue eyes instantly told me right away that this baby wasn't Kane's. He was Theo's. I hadn't only been pregnant for 6 months. I had been pregnant nearly an entire year. And suddenly everything began to make sense. The baby hadn't been mad at me. That night it had tried to kill me. I was pretty sure that this baby had somehow known that Kane was Theo's enemy and that he was bad for me, bad for us. And when I had seen Theo in the garden that night, the reason the baby had been so excited inside my stomach was because he had known that it was his father. I wasn't sure how he knew, but he had known. I suppose that it was probably because he was a direct descendant from 2 ancients, having such a powerful bloodline. His magical abilities may have even been stronger than my own. I wished more than anything that I could tell Theo. Even more than that, I wished that I could tell the other Darkin that Theo was still alive, but I had sworn myself to secrecy. "Raven, are you okay?" Colton asked me, his gray eyes meeting mine with a sense of worry. I glanced up at him. I couldn't be happier. "Why hasn't Kane come in to see the baby yet?" Reese questioned. "He doesn't even know it's not his yet. I think he got squeamish." I shrugged. "I really don't want him to come in to see him, if we're being honest. I'd rather not deal with him right now. I just want to be surrounded by the ones I really love." I glanced around at my mates with a smile. "So, what are you naming him?" Aiden asked me. I considered it for a moment. "I like Austin." "Hi, Prince Austin." Aiden reached out and grabbed his little baby hand. I smiled. Everything in this world was right. Theo's words echoed through my mind then. This is all going to make sense. One day, Chapter 27. I must have fallen asleep at some point. When I woke up, I noticed that there was a crib alongside me. The Darkin must have left Austin there before leaving the room. "Knock, knock," Maddie called out. I glanced over at the doorway to find her and Vince standing there. "Congratulations, honey," Vince said as they entered the room. "We heard the news, and the really good news." I knew what he meant, that the baby wasn't Kane's. I was pretty sure that we all thought that was good news. "Thank you. Do you want to hold him?" I asked, climbing out of bed and scooping Austin up. I might have only been imagining it, but I could have sworn that he had already grown a few pounds since I had given birth a few hours ago. I knew that werewolf babies grew really quickly, much quicker than human babies did. But I hadn't been expecting that. "Of course we do," Maddie said with a smile as I placed her into his arms. "Hi, Austin. I'm your Aunt Maddie." "And I'm your Uncle Vince," he cooed. "We saw your address on TV," Maddie said, glancing over me then as she cradled Austin in her arms. "I can't believe Kane let you end the war." "Actually, he doesn't know I did," I admitted. "I tricked him." "How did you manage to pull that off?" Vince asked with wide eyes. "Oh, you know, Just a little magic. I paused for a moment and then told them. So much has happened this week, you guys. I was kidnapped. By who? Maddie's eyes widened. Queen Lydia, my biological mother, I explained. I thought she was dead, Vince said. She was supposed to be. I paused for a moment. She is now. You won't believe who killed her when he helped rescue me. Who? Maddie's eyes widened. Milos. We're like friends now. What? You and Milo Santorini are friends. Vince just stared back at me like I was an alien. Who are you and what have you done with Raven? I laughed. As it turns out, a lot of things we thought he did, Queen Lydia, was behind. For example, she's the one who shot Theo during our first year at Werewolf Academy. Wow. So you and Milos are just cool now? Or do you still want to get your revenge eventually? He was the villain, Vince reminded me. He met his mate. It seems like he really changed him, even with the triangle ignited. I don't know. He seems okay. Who knows what the future will bring? But I honestly don't think he's going to be a problem for me anymore. He saved my life. The Queen was planning to kill me after stealing Austin. Wow, what a wicked bitch, Vince commented. That was one way to put it. We'll forever be grateful for him for saving your life. I have to send him a fruit basket, Maddie said. You think a fruit basket is equal to our Raven's life? Vince asked her. Obviously not, but we should do something nice for him for saving her, Maddie explained. I laughed. So, there's something else I need to tell you guys. What is it? Vince glanced over at me. I was pretty sure that he was almost afraid of what I was about to say next, considering I had just told them Milos was my friend. I swallowed hard. She's not the only one who's still alive either. If I tell you guys this, can you promise to keep it a secret from my mates? When do we ever spill the beans? Vince asked. Seriously, we're like official secret keepers, Maddie added. I smiled. Sorry, it's just that I promised not to tell the rest of the Darkin. He didn't want them to know. Who's he? Maddie asked. Theo. Her jaw dropped and Vince gasped. He's alive, Vince asked. Yeah, I saw him in the garden, I replied with a nod. He faked his own death. He even went to the extent of using magic to make our mate bond to make it believable to me. But why would he do that? Maddie asked. I don't know yet. He wouldn't tell me the reason. He told me that it will all make sense eventually and that he'll come back to me. And well, now that he has a child, I hope he'll come back sooner rather than later. I paused for a moment and then told them. I know this is going to sound crazy, but the baby was excited to see him before he was even born. I could just feel it. And he hated Kane. Gloria thought Austin was trying to kill me, but I'm pretty sure he was actually trying to kill Kane. Well, this kid is an incredible judge of character then, Vince said as held. Austin. Yes, you are. We all hate Kane. You're now an honorary member of the She-Man Kane Haters Club. I snorted. So now that the war is over, I guess we'll be leaving soon, Maddie said, glancing over at me. It's safe for us to go back to Wolflandia again. We'll be going back to Werewolf Academy now that you've reopened it. I nodded. That's why I reopened it. It's time for students to go back and continue their education. What about you? Vince asked. Well, I guess I have to focus on being a queen and a mom. I shrugged. I wasn't going to lie. It made me a little sad that my friends would be leaving, but I knew it wasn't forever. I was sure that they would visit me when they could, and I would make the trip to Wolflandia. We still had the house near the school that we could stay at whenever we wanted. Besides, I had my mates here too. All of my mates, even Kane on Chapter 28. When I settled back into the Queen's quarters with Prince Austin, we fell into a routine. Werewolf babies, even from the day they were born, were far more hyper and energetic than human babies. To say that he had been keeping me busier than I even expected would have been an understatement. Every time I looked at him, all I could see was Theo. To be honest, it gave me hope that Theo would return sooner rather than later. I couldn't wait for my mate to meet his son. In the meantime, all three of my original mates took turns babysitting Austin for me when I needed some free time. Each of them spent a lot of time bonding with Austin. I knew that they saw what I did when they looked at Austin Theo. It made it all the more difficult not to tell them that he was alive, that he would be back again someday. I was sleeping one night when I heard the sound of footsteps. When I woke up, I saw Kane hovering over the baby's crib with a dagger in his hand. A sterling silver dagger. I was on my feet and in his face quicker than you could count to one. What the fuck do you think you're doing? I growled at him. He grabbed me by the throat and pinned me down onto my bed. I heard this baby wasn't mine. I had to see for myself. As it turns out, everyone was right. Not only is this creature not mine, it's my enemy's. His eyes flashed with anger. I can't be letting my wife have a baby that belongs to my enemy now, can I? I can't have my enemy's son become the next king of the werewolves. I'll have none of this. Let go of me, I gasped out, finding it difficult to breathe. I struggled against him, but he was stronger than me. Why had I thought I could attack one of the triangle? Of course he was stronger than me. Finally, he let go of my throat. I was going to kill your baby, but I think it might be easier for me to just kill both of you at this point. I know you tricked me into ending the war. That was incredibly fucked up. What's incredibly fucked up is the fact that you wanted to marry me just to become king, I replied, trembling beneath him. I wasn't sure what he was planning to do, but I was a little too nervous to find out. His green eyes stared into mine menacingly. If I get rid of both of you, I will be the only ruler of the werewolf race, and I will call all of the shots. It seemed like he was thinking out loud to himself. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. As he raised the dagger into the air, I saw a movement from behind him. It took me a moment to realize that someone else was in here with us. I watched as he tiptoed across the room, sneaking up on Kane. That was when I saw his wave of black hair, and his blue eyes locked on mine from feet away. It was Theo. Theo had returned. So many emotions washed over me. Relief, excitement, confusion, but most of all fear. Fear that he was about to get caught up in something bad. When I glanced back over at Kane, I saw that he still had the dagger raised in the air. It looked like he was about to drive it into my heart. I crawled backwards, further away from him on the bed, knowing that the dagger would end my life. I knew that it was made from sterling silver, just like a bullet. Just as I had put some distance between us, I heard the sound of the gun being fired. Kane slumped over onto the foot of the bed. Theo scooped the dagger up. I breathed a slight sigh of relief. I knew that a silver bullet wasn't enough to kill Kane, especially coming from Theo. Since he was a part of the triangle, it was up to me to kill him. I had to use magic. The elements were what killed the triangle, I remembered. I thought for a moment before envisioning that Kane would get hit by lightning. A moment later, a lightning bolt touched down inside the room, shooting straight through him. I heard the sound of his body being zapped with an electrical surge. That was when I heard him stop breathing, and I felt it. Our mate bond was severed. I could tell that something had happened, but the strange part was that it didn't hurt the way my mate bond being cut with Theo had hurt. I didn't even feel sad. It just felt a little weird. He's dead, I whispered as I moved to stand next to Theo. Thank you for saving me. Don't thank me, Theo said, shaking his head. I would be lost without you. Raven. How did you even get here? His timing had been impeccable. I heard your thoughts, Raven. I guess you took the locket off. I reached for my neck and realized that it was gone. One of my mates must have taken it off of me when I had given birth and put it somewhere for safekeeping. I hadn't even noticed it until right now. I know that Austin's my son, Theo went on. I just knew I couldn't stay away from you any longer. I had to come see you and meet him. Are you back for good? I asked him. Yes. I promise I'll never leave you again. He wrapped his arms around me and then brought his mouth down on mine. Once we broke our kiss, I scooped Austin up from his crib and handed him to Theo. Hi, Austin. Theo was beaming. I had never seen him so happy in his life. I'm your daddy. Austin cooed and smiled. I had yet to see him look so happy before either. Hated to think of what could have happened just moments before if Theo hadn't arrived just in the nick of time. I tried to push the thought to the back of my mind. It was over now. Kane was gone forever. Now the Darkin could go back to normal, or as close to normal as it could ever get after everything our pack had been through. We need to do something about his body. I pointed my chin at Kane's corpse. I want it out of my bed. Let's go bury it, Theo said. Okay. I took the baby back from him. I'm going to go ask Maddie to watch Austin. I had a feeling this was going to be a really long night. 15 minutes later we had a hole dug out. As it turned out, werewolves were really fast grave diggers. Who knew? Once it was dug, Theo tossed Kane's body into a hole in the ground and we began to pile dirt on top of it. I'm so relieved to close this chapter of my life, the one with him in it. Gave Kane's face one final glance before covering it with dirt. Me too. Knowing that you were with him every day, well, it scared the shit out of me. His blue eyes met mine. Kane is the reason I faked my own death. Raven. Why? I don't understand. Gloria showed me a vision too. His eyes met mine. I saw this very moment. In fact, you saw that you would sneak into the Queen's quarters to stop him from killing me. I asked. No. I saw the two of us burying his body, he explained. She told me that I needed to fake my own death, but here's the thing. She told me that I had to do it with the help of Headmaster Crane. He helped me devise a plan to kill Kane. There's something you don't know about Headmaster Crane. What? I asked with raised eyebrows. He's Kane's father, Theo explained. And no one in this world hated Kane as much as Headmaster Crane did. Why would he hate his own son? I asked him. Kane killed his mother, leaving Headmaster Crane heartbroken for years. He paused for a moment. Don't get me wrong. I don't like Headmaster Crane himself, but he's gone now. Gone. Dead. He died of a broken heart when his mate died the other day. His mate was Lydia, Theo informed me. You knew she was alive? I asked with raised eyebrows. Not until after he died. I went through his wallet and I saw her pictures. Wow. Wait. Werewolves can die of a broken heart when their mate dies? Questioned. Yeah, Theo nodded. Why didn't I die from a broken heart when I thought I lost you? That had been the worst pain I had ever experienced in my life. Well, I think part of it was because you had your other mates to lean on. You had for other mates that took up a part of your heart. True. I also think that fate knew we would be together again one day. His blue eyes met mine. I smiled up at him. I just wish that we didn't have so much time apart. Me too. He swallowed hard. Gloria also saw the alternative. She saw what would have happened if I didn't fake my own death. If I faked my death, then I would be able to come back and we would bury Kane one day. But if I didn't fake my own death, well, that vision she showed me just about killed me. What was it? I asked him. Gloria showed me my own funeral. She showed me you crying at it. The reason I died was because Kane killed me in order to become king. So, basically, even if you stuck around, Kane was going to end up being king at some point anyway. The only difference was that you wouldn't have been alive to find out about it if you had stuck around. Yup. He nodded. You did the right thing, Theo. I'm not mad at you for faking your own death. At all. I wish I had been able to know, but maybe it was better that I was in the dark about it. I don't know. I sighed. All I know is that I'm so glad you're back for good. Me too, baby. His eyes met mine and then he kissed me again. I want you, I whispered when we broke the kiss. I want you too. He paused. Why don't you go meet me in the Queen's quarters? I'll be up there in a second. Okay, I agreed with a nod. As I headed towards the castle, my heart pounded with every step. I had craved him with every ounce of my being for so long now. I was finally about to have him, every part of him again, and that was overwhelming. Chapter 29. When I opened the door to the Queen's quarters, I was shocked to find that Theo was already inside waiting for me. How did you even beat me here? I asked him. His bright blue eyes locked on mine. Easy. I move fast when I want something. Badly enough. As I glanced around the room, I realized that he hadn't just beat me here, he had somehow managed to light candles throughout the room and scatter rose petals everywhere. I wasn't sure where he had even gotten them, but my guess was that he must have picked them from the garden. Raven, you have no idea how much I've missed you. I haven't just missed you. I've completely craved you. Ever since that night in the garden when our mate bond was reignited, I've wanted nothing more than to see you again and touch you. He reached out and touched my cheek gently and kiss you. His lips came crashing down on mine. His mouth felt fiery hot against my own. He kissed me hungrily, in a way that he had never kissed me before. Pulling my dress off over my head, he broke our kiss and stared me up and down. His eyes drifted over my body, lingering on the lacy black panties and matching bra I was wearing. I couldn't control myself any longer. I reached for his belt and undid it. As his pants dropped to the floor, I pulled his shirt off over his head. He unhooked my bra, tossing it to the floor, and then lifted me into his arms. With one swift motion, he tossed me onto the bed. I had never seen him want me so badly. The desire was obvious in his eyes and in his movements. Climbing onto the bed, he kissed me again and then began to plant a trail of kisses down my neck. He dragged his lips downwards, stopping to suck each nipple gently, eliciting soft moans from me. "Goddamn, I want you so bad, baby. It's been too long," he murmured as he continued to kiss his way down my stomach. Parting my thighs, he pulled my panties down over my knees and tossing them to the floor, leaving me completely exposed to him. His sparkling blue eyes met mine. "Tell me what you want, Raven," he said as he rested his hand on my upper thigh. "I want you," I whispered. "What do you want me to do to you?" "I want you to touch me," I managed to whisper, my craving for him taking over. His hand moved upwards, his fingers grazing ever so lightly over my slit. A shiver crept its way down my spine at his touch. "More?" he asked. I nodded. He touched me then, pushing 2 fingers inside of me. My whole body shook at his touch. He had never shown this side of himself to me before, but whatever it was, my body was reacting well to it. I had never been wetter in my life. "Tell me what you really want, Raven." His blue eyes were on mine again, daring me to tell him what I wanted. "I want you to lick me." His eyes locked on mine. "Where?" "My pussy." I swallowed hard and then whispered, "Please." Dipping his head, he licked me just once. My thighs began to shake. Grabbing his hair, I pulled his head into me. His tongue swirled its way around my pussy, and then he began to flick his tongue against my clit. A moan escaped my mouth. I couldn't take it much longer. I could already feel it building up. Gripping his head, I felt my legs beginning to quiver and my breathing growing ragged. As his mouth clamped down on my clit, sucking it hard, I felt myself come completely undone. A loud moan shuddered from my mouth. As my breathing returned to normal, he shifted himself so that he was hovering above me. He began to kiss my neck again. "Now tell me what you want," I said, making eye contact with him. "To be inside of you," Theo whispered, staring out at me from behind his fiery blue-eyed gaze. "Fuck me," I whispered. His lips came crashing down hard on mine then as I spread my legs for him, wrapping them around his waist. He gently pushed his tip against my entrance, teasing me. Then with one slow movement he pushed himself inside of me. I gasped as he entered me. He began to move in me slowly, at first too slowly. Wrapping my legs around his waist, I pulled him deeper into me. As he began to move faster and harder, building up to a steady rhythm, I found myself moaning and whimpering against his mouth. My body began to tremble as he whispered, "Come with me." I felt myself constricting around him as his breathing became heavy. I moaned out his name as I came completely undone. Seconds later, I felt his warm release. As Theo slumped on top of me, he whispered, "I love you, Raven Gallagher." "I love you too, Theo Rossi," I whispered back. Theo and I laid in silence in each other's embrace for the longest time, with moonlight streaming in through the open window and the lit candles that he had placed throughout the room. Everything about this night felt perfect. It was more than just perfect. For the first time in a long time, I felt complete. It felt like Theo was the missing piece of the puzzle that I had been trying to put together for such a long time now. Now that he had returned, everything felt right again, the way it should have been all along. "Do you hear that?" Theo asked me. I realized that it had started to rain then. I took in the soft pitter-patter of the raindrops on the stone castle. I had always loved the sound of rain. I loved it even more in this moment. "It's raining," I murmured. He shook his head. "No, that's not what I meant. Listen closer." I listened for a moment, and that was when I heard it. His heart was beating, completely in sync with mine. But the thing was, it wasn't only his heartbeat that I could hear. I could hear all 4 of my mates' heartbeats loud and clear. They were all beating in sync with mine. But the thing was, I couldn't pick out their heart beats individually. It was just that instinctively I knew that I could hear all of their heartbeats. All 5 of our hearts are beating together in harmony. I glanced down at my wrist, noticing that my dark impact tattoo had returned to normal. And my tattoo went back to how it used to be. After I married Kane, it looked shattered, but now it looks the same way it did before. My eyes darted over to meet Theo's. What could that even mean? I'm not sure. All I know is that it must mean something. Deep down I had a suspicion of my own. I wondered if the reason I had never heard the darkened members' hearts beating continuously since I had become mated to all of them had something to do with Cain. Maybe it had never been destiny for him to be my mate or for him to be a part of our pack in general. Maybe him being alive had somehow prevented me from having the full mate bond with the rest of the Darken, and now that he was gone our mate connections had strengthened. A part of me wanted to tell Theo about my theory, but I decided to keep it to myself. I knew that moving on to the next chapter of our lives, the chapter without Cain, was to bury the memories of him. And the first step to doing that was to stop talking about him. We needed to all forget that he had ever existed. I knew that wouldn't happen overnight or even in the near future, but in 5 or 10 years from now I didn't want to have to be reminded of him again. Mostly what I wanted was to go back to my old life. The life that I had lived and loved before I had ever even known that Cain existed. The life I had lived before this war had ever begun. I turned to Theo then. Now that the war is over and all of my enemies are gone, there's something I want more than anything. What is it? His striking blue eyes sparkled under the dim lighting as they pierced straight through mine. Well, actually there are 2 things. The first, I said, staring up into his face, is to marry you. Did you just propose to me? Theo asked, his eyebrows lifting questioningly, as a smile crept onto his lips. Sort of, I replied. Well, I guess I did sort of propose to you on Christmas a year ago, he reminded me. I laughed, smiling at the memory. Why this sudden decision to marry me now? Theo asked. Well, I would have married you a while ago now that you're alive. Instead you married Cain. There was a slightly bitter edge to his tone. I knew then that forgetting about Cain was going to be even harder for all of us than I had originally realized. I married Cain because I had to. I know you've missed so much while you were gone. But here's the thing. Paranormal law said that I couldn't become queen unless I took a husband. That was the reason I married Cain. I'm not saying that I didn't love Cain at one point, but I got married to him because I had to. I viewed it as a contract. I paused for a moment. There's another part of the law, though, one that's affecting me now. Paranormal law says that there has to be a king at all times, or I must step down from the throne. That's a completely barbaric law, Theo said, shaking his head. You are more than capable to be queen, with or without a king. I know, I replied. You should try to use your queenly powers to change the law, he suggested. Maybe I will someday. Things eventually need to change. But right now I am accepting that this is a patriarchal realm that we live in, and some things just won't change overnight. The last thing I want is for the crown to fall into the wrong hands. We were already way too close to that happening. I can't let anyone stand in the way. I vowed to protect the werewolf race, and that's exactly what I will do. But in order to do that, I have no choice but to get married again. So what you're saying is that you're only proposing to me because you have to get married, not because you want to get married. I do have to get married, yes. But even if it wasn't the law, I still want you to be my king. Why me? Because I love you, I told him. I love you too. But this is about more than just love. Why do you want me to be your king? Theo pressed. Because together we just work. I tried to put it into words. There's just something about you and me that makes sense. I have to choose someone to rule alongside me for the rest of my life, and I want it to be you. I believe it was always meant to be you. I met his eyes. The day you faked your own death, I planned to choose you, Theo. I was about to tell you that I chose you. And then I heard the gunshot and felt our mate bond being broken. Pausing for a moment, I quietly added, it just about killed me. He studied my face for a long moment. What about the others? He finally asked. I don't know. I still love them and care about them deeply, but it's you who I want to be at my side while I reign. I paused for a moment before adding, and you made it very clear that I couldn't choose all of you years ago, so it's not like there's much to think about here. I had to choose one of you. And I choose you. I had always known that I would end up here one day, choosing only one of them. For good. I hadn't expected it all to happen the way it would, but one thing was for sure. It had been one hell of a ride. I had made so many good memories with all of my mates. Even though I could only choose one, now that it all came down to it, I wish that I could choose them all. Raven, there's something I want to say. Theo's blue eyes locked on mine. I've done a lot of reflection since the two of us have been apart, and I've given this whole arrangement a lot of thought. And the truth is that if you don't want to make a decision between the four of us, I understand. You do. That was the absolute last thing I had been expecting him to say. Yeah, I'm okay with it. I would rather have you and share you with the others than not have you at all. Why the change of heart? I was just so surprised that he had changed his mind about all of this. For so long, he had been so insistent about the fact that I needed to make a decision between the Darkin that I couldn't choose to be with all of them. I'm afraid that the pain of losing 3 mate bonds might be enough to actually kill you, he admitted quietly, stroking my hair. And even though this arrangement isn't what any of us had planned from the beginning, I think we can make it work. Actually, let me rephrase that. We will make it work. If this is what you want. I thought about it. Ever since the first night I had learned Theo was still alive, I had really thought he was the one who I would end up choosing. I had believed it would be me and him in the end, just the two of us. The idea of not choosing between the 4 of them hadn't even seemed like an option. Was it possible for me to be with all 4 of them? I could only marry one of them, of course. Paranormal law stated that there could only be 1 king and 1 queen. Polyamorous relationships were off limits when it came to the royal thrones. But then again, maybe that was something I could try to change the law about over time too. After all, it wasn't my fault I had ended up with 4 mates. I have to think about it, I admitted quietly. There were so many things to consider. I had to make sure that this was what the others even wanted. For all I knew, they might not have been as okay with it as Theo now seemed to be. Okay, think about it all you need to, my love. Theo kissed my knuckles. You said there were 2 things you wanted more than anything. What was the second thing? I stared into his eyes. To go home. I knew that I didn't even need to explain what I meant by that. Judging from the look in Theo's eyes, he already knew. The Darkin house and Werewolf Academy. As much as the Darkin themselves were home, the truth was that the house we had all once shared and the academy felt like home too. Even though I had the castle and Nocturne Island, the truth was that my heart longed for home. Wanted to go back to the way life had been before all of this had happened, before I had lost Theo and the war had begun. Pulling me in closer to him, Theo kissed me on the forehead. Then let's go home, babe. Chapter 30. Raven Gallagher, Headmistress Wickburn announced into the loudspeaker. I climbed the stairs that led to the platform and then walked across the stage. My biggest fear was that I was going to trip and fall in front of everyone. Luckily, I didn't. Caroline Wickburn beamed at me as I approached the podium she was standing behind. I accepted my high school diploma from her. Congratulations, she said with a grin. Thanks. I smiled back at her. The truth was that graduating from Werewolf Academy hadn't been the easiest feat. We'd had to hire a full-time nanny to watch Austin while I went back to school, and all of my mates went back to teaching again. But somehow we had managed to pull it all off. I could hear the applause from the crowd as I continued my way across the stage. Uncle Ryan whistled from the crowd, and all of my mates cheered for me. Receiving my high school diploma from Werewolf Academy had been a goal I was never sure I would actually accomplish over the past year. I hadn't even been sure if I would end up making it out of the war alive. I was so relieved to have finally made it here, for all of the Darkin to have made it here all in one piece. Everyone except for Kane, that was. There were times when thinking about him made my heart ache a little. He had taken up a special place in my heart, even if it was only meant to be temporary. I knew that, in the long run, we were also much better off without him. He may have been my mate and someone who I had once loved, but I could never allow myself to forget that he was also a selfish monster. I spotted my mates in the crowd then. Theo was holding Austin. Seeing the 2 of them together made my heart melt. Actually, seeing all 4 of my mates with Austin made my heart melt. I had known that each of my mates would make an amazing father, but seeing them with my son proved that to me. I knew that it was a really ambitious goal, and Maddie and Vince both thought I was crazy to even consider it, but I wanted to have a child with each of them one day. I wasn't sure how much more complicated that would make this whole arrangement, but one thing was for sure. We had an eternity to figure all of that out. In the meantime, I just wanted to enjoy my time with all of them. After losing Kane, I knew how precious and valuable our time together truly was. Later that night, Theo and I slow danced in the middle of the Werewolf Academy gymnasium where prom was being held. Werewolf Academy did things a bit backwards compared to the human world. Prom came after graduation. The gym was decorated with an Under the Stars theme, but the cool thing here was that the decor wasn't constructed with papier-mâché or LED lights like typical human high schools. They hadn't come from a home decor store. The room was decorated with magic. It looked like an authentic night sky above us, filled with stars and a full moon which casted its glow on the gymnasium floor. It was absolutely beautiful. As the song we had been dancing to came to an end and Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran began to play, Theo's bright blue-eyed gaze captured mine. The stars, the moon, it all looks stunning, Theo said quietly, repeating the words I had said to him the night of our first date, the night he had taken me to the solarium. Just like you, I whispered, giving him the same response that he had given me that night. He began to spin me in circles, then dipping me low and then kissing me on the lips right there in the middle of the dance floor, as if we were the only ones in the room. Butterflies swarmed around inside my stomach just as much as they had the very first time we kissed beneath the stars. He's mine. As the thought entered my mind, a giddy feeling rushed through me. Staring up into his eyes, I noticed how the blue shirt he wore under his tuxedo made his bright blue eyes pop. He had worn it to match the navy blue prom dress I had picked out for tonight. It was a princess-style dress with a sparkly silver bodice. As the song came to an end, Reese approached us. May I have the honor of this next dance? As Theo handed me off to him, he smiled and winked at me. Turning to face Reese, I stared up into his smiling face as his arms fell to my waist. You look beautiful tonight, Raven, Reese told me. Every time I think you can't get any more beautiful, you do. Thank you. I wrapped my arms around his neck as we got lost to the beat of All of You by John Legend. Once it came to an end, Reese headed over to get us some punch at the drinks stand. Glancing over my shoulder at Aiden and Colton, I knew that both of them were waiting for their turn to slow dance with me. Once they'd had their turn, Theo and I would dance again. To say that they kept me busy would have been a bit of an understatement. But the thing was, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Maddie and Vince came over to me then. I glanced over at the drink station, realizing that both Brandon Mitchell and Julie were filling their cups with punch too. You look so happy tonight, Vince said as they approached me. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen you look this happy in our lives, Maddie added. That's because I am happy. Everything about me, my mind, body, and soul, felt completely happy and at peace with everything for once. I was so relieved to know that Austin was safe with the babysitter we had left him with. Back at the Darkin house, there was no more Milos or Kane to worry about. Headmaster Black and Queen Lydia were no longer threats to me. For the first time since I had learned I was a werewolf, it felt like I had nothing to worry about. It was an incredible feeling. And it wasn't just that. Being here tonight with all four of my mates, well, I had never thought we would ever make it here. I thought that Theo especially wouldn't make it to my prom, but I had once wondered if any of us would. But now that we were here, everything about my prom night felt right. Even though Headmaster Crane had always made it clear that I wouldn't be able to take even one of the Darkin as my prom date since they were my professors, his word clearly no longer held any value now that he was gone. Caroline Whitburn hadn't objected to me taking not just one but all of my mates to my prom. Considering I was still the queen of the wolves, I wasn't sure if she could have told me no even if she had wanted to, but she seemed completely understanding of my relationships with my mates. I knew that there were a lot of werewolves in our kingdom who judged the fact that I had chosen to be with all four of my mates, but honestly, they could fuck off. We hadn't chosen this. We had never wished for any of it. It had simply just happened. And there had been so many times over the past 4 years that I had wished I could completely undo it all. I had found myself questioning if it was wrong to love more than one of the Darkin at one time. I had questioned if it was ethical or moral. I had even wondered if something was wrong with me for loving more than one guy at once. I had thought that not being with all four of them would make things less complicated, but now I knew that the opposite was actually true. Not being with all four of them would completely complicate everything. How could I have broken any of their hearts or my own heart by choosing only one of them? I couldn't. It just hadn't felt right. And the truth was, you couldn't just undo what was written in your destiny. You couldn't rewrite what had already been spelled out for you in the stars. At the end of the day, none of this had ever been our choice. So, I hadn't been able to choose between them. Couldn't make a decision when it seemed like fate had wanted me to be with all of them. And the idea of giving up even one of them had been enough to crush me. So, I had done what I wanted to believe anyone in my situation would have done. I had chosen all of them, and I had brought all 4 of them as my prom dates. But I knew that this was about way more than just prom. What I had really done was made a commitment to the entire Darken pack. From here on out, all 4 of them would be my dates to everything for the rest of my life. For the rest of eternity. You know what we have to do, right? Vince asked. Of course, Maddie said with a nod. It just wouldn't be the same if we didn't. It's our tradition, I agreed as we fell into line. Our lifelong tradition, Maddie added. We have to keep this tradition going, even when we're no longer Werewolf Academy students. So, we have to come to the end of the year festival even when we're no longer students. Vince shot her a skeptical look. Actually, I think that's going to be completely doable. You guys, I have exciting news to share, I told them. Ooh, what is it? Maddie's chocolate brown eyes grew really wide. Caroline Wickburn offered me a job. You're looking at the future advanced lunar magic professor, I informed them. What? No way. What about Professor Lee? Vince asked. Professor Lee isn't going anywhere. We'll be teaching different classes. Now, that Caroline is headmistress. She wants to make some changes to the Werewolf Academy's curriculum. Magic is going to be a bigger focus than it once was. Congratulations, Maddie said. Yeah, congrats, but I have another question, Vince said. How are you going to teach? What about being queen? I'll still be queen. I'll live on Nocturne Island during the weekends and summer, I explained. I don't know how long I'll end up teaching here. Will I always be a professor at Werewolf Academy? I shrugged. The only thing I do know is that this is where my heart is pulling me right now. I'm so excited for you, Maddie said as we climbed onto the tilt-a-whirl. Vince and I both climbed onto the ride after her. I'm excited for you too, Professor Romero. Vince shot me a wide-eyed glance. My request to legally change my name finally kicked in this week, so it's Professor Gallagher for now. For now. Maddie's eyes widened. Are you guys ready to be in another royal wedding next month? I asked. The Paranormal High Court had given me 30 days from the date of my Werewolf Academy graduation to get married again. I hadn't broken the news to my friends until now because I had been too afraid to jinx it, but now that we were close enough it seemed safe to share with them. Abso-freaking-lutely. Vince beamed. Yes, I'm so excited. Maddie grinned. And so excited that it won't be to Kane, Vince added. Can I help you with wedding planning again? Maddie asked. Sure, but this time it's going to be a little bit different. I was unsure of how to break the news. It took a whole lot of persuasion, but I was able to convince the Paranormal High Court to let me get married to all of my mates. All 4 of them? Vince's jaw dropped. I nodded. Honey, that just isn't fair, he complained, rolling his eyes. Don't get me wrong. I love Julie so much, but what I would give to walk in your shoes for even a day. Not me. That seems completely exhausting. I can barely keep up with one husband, let alone 4, Maddie said with a chuckle. But if you're marrying all 4 of them, who gets to be king? Well, this was the part that took the most convincing. All 4 of them will be king. Vince's jaw dropped. God damn. As the ride slowly began to spin us into motion, I spotted Theo holding Austin and pointing me out to him. I smiled and waved. As the ride began to whip us around faster, I couldn't help but think about how much this ride was like the eternal life that lay before me. It was about to be filled with inevitable twists and turns, and I couldn't wait to find out what would happen next. The only thing I did know was that it would be with them. All 4 of them. My mates. The loves of my life. Until the end of time. The end.